Great. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Abby Foley. I am the Outreach and Recruitment Manager for CASA of Adams and Broomfield Counties. I am also a CASA volunteer. I actually started as a volunteer prior to joining the CASA staff. And then we, of course, have Cheryl with us, who you all know. She is one of our awesome volunteers. She's been with us for over a year and a half now, I would say. And her supervisor has wonderful things to say about her. So we're really happy she's a part of our team. And then we have Judge John Popovich with us. He is a retired judge from the 17th Judicial District and serves on our board of directors as well. So he'll be speaking a little bit about CASA from the judicial perspective and why it's important in the courtroom. So I am going to go ahead and get started by sharing this informational video, and then we'll kind of get into an organizational overview and the ins and outs of the volunteer role. So just give me 1 second while I share this.
Growing up is tough for a kid. They have school and homework, practices and games, there are doctor's appointments and detention halls. The making friends and the keeping friends, discovering who they are and who they aren't. There's so much to learn. There's this whole world out there, right here. These times are transforming in someone's story, and they can really be quite chaotic. That chaos of being a child only increases when abuse and neglect fill their home. The normal winds of chaos are now a storm. And sometimes, when the storm is so great, a child must be removed from their home. And this is a really tough day. It's complicated and it's painful. When a child is removed from their home because of abuse or neglect, they leave their normal and they enter foster care. The court sends them to a new place, a new home, often to a new school with new people, new everything. And all of these new things aim at a better life for the child. They aim to help in the healing process for the family. But it's still tough. They still have the school activities, the doctor's appointments, and the lessons to learn. But now court dates, visits with parents, and check-ins with social workers quickly bombard the calendar. And there's the pain of separation from what they know and where they feel comfortable. There are hundreds of children in our city who experience chaotic days like this, weeks like this, years like this. And these days, weeks, and years are difficult. They're exhausting and isolating. They're really tough. But there are ways to help. Ways to bear the burdens the child is carrying. Ways to make the days less tough. These children need to feel more supported. They need someone constant who is on their team. Someone who is fighting for their best amidst all the shuffle. And a CASA volunteer provides this help. A court-appointed special advocate helps bear these burdens. They are the constant amidst the chaos. In the middle of all the shuffle and uncertainty, they know the child. There are still tough days, but now there's someone standing up for the child, day in, day out. Someone who knows both the biological and foster parents. Someone who meets with the teachers, doctors, and social workers to ensure the child's needs are being met. Someone who speaks for the child's best interest in court. Someone who the judge counts on for insight. Someone who cares about the child and just lets them be a kid. Someone who is there for the tough days, the great days, and the in-between days. This someone is so important. This someone is a CASA volunteer. And there are hundreds of children in our city waiting for a CASA volunteer. They're waiting for someone to speak up for them. They're waiting for someone to help weather the storm. Each child in foster care needs this support, this someone to count on. Be this someone for a child in foster care. Be their advocate. Be a powerful voice for their best interest. Be a CASA volunteer.
All right. So I hope you enjoyed that video. Gives you a good overview of the CASA volunteer. So I'm just gonna go into what our organization is, what our volunteers do. So CASA, as you heard in the video, stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates. We are a national organization. We have almost 1,000 programs all over the country. And here in Colorado, there are 18 CASA programs. So each of us, each of our programs are individual 501c3s. And the program we are with is CASA of Adams and Broomfield Counties, which serves the 17th Judicial District. Now, I will talk about later if you're interested in becoming a CASA volunteer and don't live or work in Adams and Broomfield counties, I am more than happy to connect you to your local program. So I'm going to speak about CASA more in general terms because we're obviously just one local program. So while there are 1,000 programs that are serving children in our community, we're really operating with the same goal in mind, which is to recruit, train, and supervise community volunteers, everyday people, to represent and advocate for the best interests of child victims of abuse and neglect. Now, in Adams and Broomfield counties, we have approximately 1,600 children with an open abuse and neglect case. And last fiscal year, we were able to serve 567 of them. So while that is an amazing number, we still have a huge need for volunteers. We are only meeting about a third of the children that could potentially have an advocate. And that is really consistent across the metro area. There is a need for CASA volunteers. So not just in our jurisdiction. So once a CASA volunteer is trained and sworn into the court, they are assigned or appointed to what's called a dependency and neglect case. And that is just a court term for a child abuse or neglect case. So how those cases open is when reports of suspected abuse or neglect are made to the Department of Human Services. They take those calls and they decide what to do next. And if an investigation is performed, they determine that abuse or neglect is happening, they can petition the court to open up a dependency and neglect case. And so once that court case is opened, that is where CASA can become involved. So that is where that 1,600 number comes from in our jurisdiction. That is the amount of children that are involved in a court case. So on each of these cases, there are several different people working together. There's a caseworker who works for the Department of Human Services, and they are really like a case manager for the whole family. They're overseeing the parents, the children, and then any services that anybody is engaging with. Then there is a guardian ad litem, who is the abbreviated GAL. They are the child's attorney. And like an attorney, they are there to advocate for the child's legal best interests. And then often there is a CASA volunteer. And what is different from a CASA to these other parties from the outside looking in is, one, they're a volunteer. They are not a caseworker. They're not a licensed attorney. They're there as a member of the community. And then two, they only have one case or one family that they're working with, which really puts them in a unique position to truly, really get to know the family and the children on a deeper level, really build that strong relationship, which the other professionals have huge caseloads, which when you have a larger amount of families you're working with, you're limited in your capacity. So that is really a true benefit of a CASA only working with one family. So as a CASA, I really like to think of the CASA volunteer role in kind of two silos. So the first being building a relationship and gathering information. So with our program, we ask our volunteers to meet with the kids on their case at least twice a month. And that varies by program. It's anywhere between 2 to 4 times a month what's being asked. And that during that time, you're building a relationship, you're building rapport, and spending time with them, quality time. Maybe you're going to the park together or playing a game, doing an art project, things that the kids might enjoy. Right now, a lot of that is happening virtually. Some of our volunteers are doing virtual visits, some in person with safety precautions in place, or a little bit of both. And really the goal of spending time with them is to figure out what their situation is, what needs are being met, and what needs are not being met. Now, that's not just in terms of their safety, but in terms of their emotional well-being, their medical needs, their educational needs, really looking at the whole child, not just their physical well-being. While you're getting to know them, we also feel it's incredibly important for our volunteers to have conversations and build relationships with the people that are in that child's life that are making an impact. So that might be biological parents, foster parents, teachers. All of these people are really going to help inform you about what's best for this child, but also really get to know the whole child and everything that's going on. The goal is to help find safety and permanency for the child or the children on the case. And the goal of these cases, they are civil cases, is to be focused on rehabilitation and reunification of the family. So the court puts a lot of supports in place to be able to help the parents and get them to a place where they can provide that safe environment. So that is always the initial goal with these cases. Now, the role of the CASA doesn't stop at just meeting with the kids and gathering that information. You're using that information to advocate for the child. So as a CASA, you are a member of the professional team, and you're one of the people that gets to inform the judge about what's going on. So that is done in two ways. One, in a court report that details what's going on in that child's life, what's going on in the family, what are your concerns or red flags, what's going well, what is, how are the children thriving? And then you also attend the court hearings, which happen every 60 to 90 days. And that is an opportunity for you to speak directly to the judge and share anything that you feel is important. And that's also an opportunity to really be a voice for the child. Oftentimes the kids don't attend the court hearings. And so you can be a person to really be their voice. So that is incredibly important. So really, as you heard, there are kind of two roles that work together with a CASA, that gathering that information, but then taking it to court and truly advocating for the child. I do want you to have an opportunity to hear from one of our volunteers about her story, Cheryl, and tell you about what her role looks like as a CASA and kind of share her experience. So I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl to talk about her experience as a volunteer. And then after that, I will have Judge Popovich share a little bit about the importance of CASA volunteers on these cases. So Cheryl, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Thanks, Abby. I became a CASA a year and a half ago. Might be a little bit more than a year and a half. The children on my case, I have 3 siblings, and they are 8, 10, and 12. So as you can imagine, it is a handful of energy and just a bundle of energy. A typical outing for me, this would be pre-COVID. What a typical outing would be, I would go to the foster home to see the kids and maybe spend about an hour, maybe going to the girls' room and saying, show me your dolls, and have fun with her for a little bit, and then go down in the basement where the 2 boys were playing and throw the baseball and play with their toys. And as you can imagine, just spending that hour with them, there was always some drama. So I started to get to know the kids really, really well, kind of being there, in real situations with them. And after a little bit, the foster parents, they offered me an opportunity to help them and be with the children a little bit more by taking them to their therapy sessions every 2 weeks. So they would go to therapy once a week, but then I offered to come and take the kids myself in my car to their therapy session. This was not an obligation, by no means for me, but I offered to do that. And what I learned was when you get kids in a car, you really get to know the kids as well, because there's all this talking going on, and then you're answering questions and responding. And so I thought that was a really special time for me to spend with the kids, is just driving in the car with them. And then also at the therapy session, each child got their own time. So I would be with the other 2 children in the office waiting room, playing little games with them too. So that's when it really started meaning a little bit more to me, is because I really started to get to know the kids, and I was kind of responsible for them on an outing like that. I did attend some IEP meetings at their schools, but once COVID hit, then all the physical activities and in-person stopped. And so I pretty much every 2 weeks call them up on like a Google Duo chat and talk with each individual child. They take the phone with them, and I say, do you have anything in your room that you want to show me, a toy or something that you've made? And so that just kind of opens up the conversation to seeing their rooms and what they're interested in. And to supplement not being in person, I try to send letters, maybe every 2 or 3 weeks, and, a big manila envelope type letter that has like some stickers. And I bought quite a few little books of fun stickers that I just tear a page out and stick it in there. And then I've been trying to find articles of people that are doing good in the community. I think Time Magazine had the 100 most influential people recently, and I found some really neat people to tear the page out and stick it in those letters, to start introducing the kids to people that look like them and maybe they're interested in and that are doing good in their community. Some of the best parts of being a CASA, I think the times that I need to be the adult and intercede during meltdowns, I feel it's just a really rewarding way to contribute to their lives, because they have not had that in their past life or their past home that they got removed from. So to be an adult that provides them an example of a positive adult and somebody that provides proper boundaries and structure, they need that. They need all that they can get around them to see, okay, this is what adults should be like. So that has been really rewarding for me, is to, when one of the children is having a meltdown, is being there for them and, holding on to them, or just letting them be, or have that conversation that needs to happen. And another really great part of being a CASA, I believe, is outside from getting to know the children and being with the children, is getting to know the court system. I never would have known what goes on in these court hearings unless I was a CASA. So I do not say much in the court hearings other than towards the end, everybody gets to stand up and say something to the judge. But it's mostly sitting quietly and observing and absorbing and listening. And that has been really, really fun for me. Some of the challenges that I have faced. I tend to have this inner critic in my mind that pops up and says, I'm not doing enough, or what I'm doing isn't making that much of a difference. And I'm learning to ignore that inner critic, because I think we all have that inner critic, and we can learn to just ignore that, because that's not truly what I believe is going on. It's just, it can be kind of a very self-deprecating conversation that you have in your mind that can actually convince you to stop doing something that maybe you can continue doing if you just ignore that negativity. And I know some cases, the actual parents, they're called respondent parents if they're the ones that are the biological parents of the child. And so the children are still living with them and they are trying to make changes in order to keep their children. That might be a challenge, but I have not faced that yet, because the children have been removed from the home and they are with foster families. And my experience with these foster families has been so awesome. They're advocating for the children. They are trying to work with the therapists. And so my job is a lot easier because these foster parents are doing such a good job. But I know that my next case, that may not be the situation. So that could potentially be a challenge in the future. And then the guardian ad litem and the caseworker, they have been super awesome to work with. They've been on top of a lot of things and have helped me come up to speed with what's going on. And I know some cases that might not be the case there as well. I may need to actually advocate more for the children because the GAL and the caseworker are not doing as good of a job. But so far, I've had an awesome experience with everybody. And I don't think I've had this aha moment when I realized the difference that I was making in a case, or that I was making a difference. Just all the things that I've mentioned, they've kind of just happened slowly over time, and everything has just built up to making me feel like I am making a difference. So it's been a lot of little things that have happened. You know, a comment that maybe a foster parent has said, or maybe the child has told me, or just a lot of different factors that have made me feel like I am making a difference. And what I would say to somebody who's thinking of becoming a CASA, I know what it was like leading up to that point to where I actually pulled the trigger and went to a CASA recruiting event. I turned down many of those events, you know, thinking, oh, that's not for me. I'm too scared. I'm not quite sure what I would get involved in. And I actually had family members that tried to convince me not to do it because they know me. They know that I'm very sensitive and emotional. And they didn't think that I would really like it or be able to kind of handle the reality of it all. But I just felt such a calling to make a positive impact on children's lives. So I pulled the trigger, and I'm actually a little bit more capable than I thought. And I'm able to compartmentalize, some of the things that you hear in the court hearings about the respondent parents are very, very tragic. But I've been able to kind of separate that and focus on the children. And then one last thing that I would like to say is to our secular and atheist community is we need to get out there and we need to tell our community that we care just as much as anybody else cares. And we have a lot to offer. And so I would encourage any secular humanists or atheists to feel that this is a great opportunity to make a difference.
Thank you so much for sharing, Cheryl. Sorry, that was a bit of a tongue twister, sharing, Cheryl. That was wonderful. And I think Cheryl is a great example of how our volunteers have adapted during COVID. I mean, what a fun idea to send letters to your kids and include inspiring articles and about people in the community. So that's wonderful. And I think you're so right. We all have that inner critic, especially people that are drawn to a volunteer role like this. Typically people that care a lot, right? And want to make an impact in the community. So you're not alone in that, but you're doing a wonderful job. So thank you. And I am going to turn it over to Judge Popovich. And then after that, I'll get into kind of the next steps for somebody who might be interested in becoming a volunteer. So go ahead, Judge Popovich.
Thank you. Let me just kind of introduce myself and kind of give you a little bit of a background as to who I am and kind of what I did during the vast portion of my work life. And Abby, before I begin, Nancy went upstairs, unfortunately, but if you looked, the t-shirt she had on had the CASA logo on it. So she was wearing that today. I didn't even make the connection till I looked up, and if she comes back down, I'll have her show it to everybody. Okay.
I love it.
Yeah, it was just by coincidence. It really was. Anyway, my name is John Popovich, and I was a district court judge for 31 years out in the 17th Judicial District, which originally just encompassed Adams County and now encompasses both Broomfield and Adams County once Broomfield became a county. Just a little bit about myself. I'm from Denver. I was raised in Old North Denver, which is now either Hilo, Lolo, Bolo. I'm not sure what it is, but all I know is there's kind of one single family residence left on the block where I grew up. It was a different world then. I actually went to North High, University of Colorado, and also the University of Colorado Law School. And after I graduated, I worked for legal aid for a couple, 3 years, then was in private practice for about 10, and then decided there was an opening for a district court judgeship, and I applied for it. And that was, well, it's more than 31 years ago now, because I actually retired in May of 2017. Abby, just to show I'm not lying, Nancy just showed up. There's the t-shirt with the logo. Okay.
Oh, I love it.
I just wanted to show you that. I'm sorry. I don't mean to make light of stuff, but it was. So anyway, I retired in May of 2017, and I'm going to tell everybody kind of a secret that nobody knows, that all state court judges, Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, District Court, County Court, all state court judges cannot work beyond their 72nd birthday. We have to retire, on or before our 72nd birthday. In my case, I retired in May of 17. My 72nd birthday was, that was on a Friday or on a Wednesday, the last day of May. And my birthday was following Monday. So I kind of went to the very end. It was just a great job. I enjoyed it. I'm one of those very fortunate people that really enjoyed, every minute that I worked. Just kind of give you a little bit of overview how we did cases, up in the 17th. We actually rotated divisions. So we would serve in a division for a couple of years. So a couple of years, we might do domestic relation or, divorce cases. A couple of years we do juvenile cases. A couple of years we do criminal cases, and then civil cases, which are like business cases, car accidents, in civil cases, and also did probate and mental health cases. So we would kind of be one place for a couple of years. We had the option of kind of negotiating a little bit where we wanted to go. And I have to just tell you, I was like going into juvenile. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was the best division to be in for a couple of reasons. One is, you're really trying to help people. And number two, in the juvenile court, unlike the criminal court, it's a more collaborative court. In criminal, it's like, we see on TV their trials and objections and rulings, and it's really kind of an adversarial system, to the highest order. And civil was the same way. Juvenile, on the other hand, and I think Cheryl kind of hit on that, and so did Abby, it's more collaborative because you have a lot of different players in those cases. You have the county attorney's office who represents the Department of Human Services. You have caseworkers who are employed by the Department of Human Services. Most of the time, the respondents or the parents have court-appointed lawyers who represent their interest. You also have a guardian ad litem who represents ostensibly the best interest of the child or children. And then you also have, in a lot of cases, you have the CASA, who really, and I don't want to say represents, but I think advocate for, I'll get it out yet, advocates for the children. And I'm going to get back to how important I think the CASAs are in terms of we as judges making decisions. And especially in the juvenile court, I can tell you that the more information that we as judges have, I think I don't want to say the better that we can make a decision, but I think the more comfortable you are with the decision you make as a judge. And again, both Abby and Cheryl kind of hit on this, and I don't want to go over old ground, but I just kind of want to give you an idea of, what these cases are and kind of the steps that go along in these cases. As Abby said, these are not criminal cases. However, in a lot of cases, you'll find that there's also a parallel criminal case, in cases involving, child abuse, and cases involving sexual assault on a child, even cases involving child neglect. Oftentimes, there'll be a criminal case that's filed by the district attorney, and essentially the criminal case is to determine the guilt or innocence of someone, and then to mete out punishment. The dependency neglect cases, and as Abby said, these are really child neglect and child abuse cases. The whole, I don't want to say the whole purpose, but really there's kind of a dual purpose. One is obviously protection for the children. And when I say children, child or children, I'll use those interchangeably. And the other also is to reunify parents and children. That's really in the statute. Now, that doesn't mean that it happens in all cases, and I'm going to get into that here in just a couple moments. But how these cases come before us as judges is someone has made a report. Several of us are what are called mandatory reporters. Teachers and judges and first responders are all mandatory reporters. So if they come upon a situation, and oftentimes, I've got to be honest with you, this will happen like in the middle of the night, where the police will go out because the parents are engaged in a fight or assaultive behavior. There's two children in the house, and the children are then taken into protective custody. And then obviously the case gets reported. These cases sometimes come up where a parent is pulled over for a DUI. The kids are in the car. It's deemed that the safety of the children is in jeopardy, and they're taken into custody. Oftentimes they'll come about from a school nurse or a teacher making a report, and sometimes a neighbor, just from an anonymous report saying, you know, I've seen, you know, the two children in the neighborhood, they're 4 and 5 years old. It's 25 degrees out, and they're out walking around without clothes and shoes on. You know, that's just kind of how the cases come about. The reports are made. The reports are then made to the Department of Human Services, and several things happen from there. If it is an emergency situation, then there's a request for what's called a temporary protective order, and what that means is that a judge is contacted or a magistrate. The caseworker basically explains what the situation is, and then there's a request that the department be granted immediate temporary protective custody of a child or children. And very often, if that happens, the children are either placed in foster care, or if there's an appropriate relative who can provide for the safety of a child, the child will be placed in a relative. It's just obviously less traumatic for a kid, but you have to be sure that relative will, in fact, protect the safety of the child. Within 72 hours, there's then a court hearing to determine whether this temporary protective custody order remains in full force and effect. Oftentimes, there's not a temporary protective order. Sometimes the children really remain in the family home, even with the dependency neglect being filed. A dependency neglect is filed with a petition. It's a court document that alleges or sets forth the allegations of why the children, or why the court should really get involved, and why the children are in danger. The parents are oftentimes appointed an attorney. As I said, a guardian ad litem gets appointed, CASA gets appointed, and obviously the caseworker is involved through the Department of Human Services. The first, there's some hearings, but there's three, kind of three or two really major legal proceedings that come about. The first is what's called an adjudicatory hearing, where there's a determination made whether the courts, whether there's enough evidence, if you will, for the courts to get involved. The parents have the right to a jury trial or trial to the court. It's up, they have that option. And since these are civil cases, the burden of proof is by preponderance of the evidence. That's standard in a civil case, but it's a regular trial. Witnesses are called and folks are cross-examined, and evidence is presented, and either the judge or the jury makes a determination whether the petition is adjudicated. If it is, then in fact the next hearing is what's called a dispositional hearing, and at that point there's what's called a treatment plan, and basically a treatment plan is a document that is prepared by the department. CASAs oftentimes have some input. The GAL has input, and basically it'll provide for things like therapy and counseling, drug abuse or alcohol counseling, a whole panoply of things that can be ordered by the court. The parents have to be given a reasonable period of time to comply with the treatment plan, and it's everyone's hope that they do comply with it, that the problems in the family get ameliorated, the children go back, and things work out. Sometimes it doesn't. Life's not perfect, so to speak, and oftentimes that doesn't happen. So then the next hearing is what's called a termination hearing. Now, a termination hearing has to be held before a judge such as myself. There's not the right to a jury trial. The burden of proof is a bit higher. It's what's called clear and convincing evidence, which means the department has to present more evidence in terms of whether the parental rights should be terminated. The court has to make all kinds of findings that it's in the best interest of the children, that there are no less drastic alternatives, such as placement with a relative or third party. If, however, after the hearing, a judge makes a determination that the parental rights should be terminated, they're terminated, and the children are then freed for adoption. That's kind of the scope of these hearings. And how CASA becomes involved is, and Cheryl and both Abby indicated this, that CASA really advocates for the children. And I'm going to get to this in just a second, why I think the CASAs are so very important. They really have a unique perspective. Caseworkers are also, providing services and monitoring the case, but they really have a dual role. And part of the dual role is that, they're trying to reunify the family, they're trying to provide services. But if in fact, the case gets to a termination hearing, they're going to be adverse witnesses to the parents, and it's a real conflict. Plus, the caseworkers really do have a tremendous number of cases, and they just can't put in the time that CASAs put in meeting with the children. The guardian items also make recommendations as to what they feel is in the best interest in terms of the programs, and also in terms of potential termination. Cheryl kind of hit on this. She said, she doesn't say much in court, which most folks don't say much in court, because it is and should be an intimidating process, especially like when we're in juvenile delinquency cases, which are another set of cases. But it's often kids who committed some criminal act, and it's always been my philosophy that I like the court to be intimidating, so the kids don't think they're going to the principal's office again. They really are in front of some judge. But anyway, it is an intimidating process. But I just want you to bear in mind that, the CASA volunteers, we really do want to hear what they have to say for several reasons. One, I'm always amazed, both in terms of the reports, the written reports and the oral reports, how much CASAs know about the kids, how much they know about the families, the contact they've had. I'm just always impressed by the information. But and that is obviously assistive to us in making decisions. But I've said this before, and you oftentimes hear, well, a CASA really is another set of eyes and ears, and that's true to some extent, but it's a different set of eyes and ears. And I oftentimes use the analogy that we think of jury trials, and juries really represent the conscience of the community in terms of finding guilt or innocence in a criminal case or matters in a civil case. In my view, I think that's one of the real benefits of having a CASA on a case, because CASA represents community people. They represent what normal citizens feel should be done in the case. They're not lawyers. They have a different perspective that I find to be really valuable. And I can tell you on several occasions, when we're dealing with custody cases, or where the children are going to be placed or something like that, the CASA, oftentimes the recommendations from the guardian ad litem and the caseworker and the CASA are the same, or similar, I should say, but sometimes they're not. And I can tell you on more than one occasion, I've had CASAs get up and one sticks in my mind, and I really can't talk about the case too much, but I remember it had to do with custody between a couple of grandparents, because the parental rights had already been terminated. And I remember the CASA, when we started the case in the report, made one recommendation, and then we were going around kind of a circle at the end saying, anybody got anything to say? And the CASA got up and she says, I've listened to all this, and she says, from my perspective, just as a grandmother, both these women ought to have contact with the child. And I can't say how I ruled, but that's the kind of opinion, or that's the kind of recommendation that only a CASA can make. So I just can't state strongly enough how rewarding it is. I know several people who have become CASAs, one in fact being a wife of a good judge friend of mine, and she's just over the moon with it. So I'll just put it in that. So I didn't mean to go on quite so long, but we have a little bit of extra time. I kind of want to give just an overview of what these cases were about, and also to provide the fashion show from Nancy. The t-shirt is there. So thank you. Really, really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, sure. Judge Popovich. And I think he puts it so well that of a CASA really representing the conscience of the community. And I think that speaks to, that anybody can really do this. As long as you are somebody that cares about children and wants to make an impact, and isn't afraid to speak up when needed. We truly feel anybody can do this, and that that's what makes this volunteer role so special and unique, is we have volunteers from all types of backgrounds and experiences, and we want it to continue to be that way. So I just want to touch on a couple more things before I have one more video, and then of course, if there are any questions, we can answer those. So the first thing is we have so much support from our CASA team. No matter what program you become a volunteer with, you are assigned a supervisor. So at our CASA program, they're called Senior Program Coordinators, and their job is to be there for volunteers. They are there they can attend the first visit with you. They go to court with you and take notes. They are there to answer questions, to be a sounding board, and really offer advice as well. They are incredible, and that is how, you're not thrown into this alone. You have guidance and someone to help bring you along the way. We also have peer coordinators who are seasoned CASA volunteers that actually go on to supervise other volunteers. So that's a more enhanced volunteer role that we have as well. So along with that, the majority of our staff are also CASA volunteers or have had cases themselves. So our team can really speak to the experience and provide support to our volunteers as well. Another thing that people are often wondering about is the time commitment. And I do want to mention that the majority of our volunteers are working full-time. While this is a more involved volunteer role than your traditional one, it is flexible. So as we mentioned, we have an expectation that our volunteers see the kids on their case at least twice a month. You get to schedule those. There's no set day or time that you need to go, so you can figure out what works best for you. Court hearings, you're going to know about 60 to 90 days in advance. Those, of course, happen during the day, during the week, but you will be able to schedule out and know that they're coming. Same with any, meetings. We call them family team meetings with the parents and the professional team. Those are scheduled far out, and then anything else that you choose to do as a CASA. For example, Cheryl mentions joining in on the IEP meeting, things like that. You're going to figure out what works best for you to do those things and be a part of that. So the majority of the time you can schedule that out. Now we say that the average time commitment is about 10 to 15 hours per month. That really varies month to month. There are some months where, there's not a whole lot going on, maybe outside of your visits. So on those months, maybe it's 4 to 5 hours. But there are months where, there might be a lot going on. You're writing a court report, you have a court hearing. Those months you might be falling in that time frame. But just to give you an idea. And then we do ask our volunteers to make a commitment of at least 18 months. And that is because that's the average length of these cases. And there is often turnover with caseworkers, with attorneys. So having someone consistent from start to finish is really huge for these cases. I experienced that on my first case that I was a part of. By the end of the case, when everything was closing, I was the only person that had been there the entire time, including the parents' attorneys. So it is incredibly helpful to have somebody be consistent for sure. Now, as far as kind of our process, if you're interested in becoming a volunteer, no matter the program, there are 3 steps, 3 general steps that you take to become a volunteer. Each program's kind of structure runs a little different, but I'll talk about how our application and training process works. So it starts with an online application. After that is submitted, we schedule an interview with one of our staff members. And right now, all of those interviews are happening over Zoom. And that's an opportunity for our team to get to know you. And then after your interview is when you'll be ready for training. So our training has been transitioned to a virtual model. It goes on for about 4 weeks. And each week you receive a different set of reading material and homework centered around a case study. Each case study is going to hit on different topics like poverty, addiction, domestic violence, and how that's all related to these cases. We also do a lot on court report writing. And then you partake in a virtual session each week with our training coordinator and other training members. We also do, of course, background checks and fingerprinting. And also during training, you get to fill out what's called a case preference form. And on that form, you're able to identify what age group you're comfortable with, if there's any particular type of case you would want to work on or would not want to work on. And then what your supervisor will do after you're sworn into the court is they will pull some cases that might be a good fit for you, and you'll actually get to select your case. So you have, the ability to know how many kids there are, their ages, and the general situation as well, which is really nice, especially if you're more comfortable with certain things. So what I'm going to do before I show you the last video is I'm going to link a Google form and put it in the chat. This is just a general form for contact information. And if you're interested in getting connected to your local program, this would be the form to fill out so that I can see what county you live in so that I can connect you to that. And Cheryl, feel free, or anybody, feel free to send that out or my contact information to anybody who might be interested. I keep an eye on those forms. And so it's a good way to just express that interest. Obviously, don't fill it out if you're not interested. It's just if you're interested in getting connected or learning more. So I am gonna, sorry, I thought I had that pulled up, but I will drop my contact information in the chat as well, along with that link to the Google form. And then I'm gonna show you this last video, and then we'll go ahead and do some questions. Okay, there's the link to that. And here we go with the video.
Imagine trying to build a house, but the pieces always fall down. Friends and family in your life seem to slip and move and break. And no matter how hard you try, the ground keeps moving underneath. It hurts to hope, and there's always something that tears apart your home. You're tired of trying to hold everything up. And every time you want to put the pieces back, nothing seems to go where it's supposed to, or fit the way it did before. You tell everyone you're okay, because the make-believe makes a real home easier to believe in. Sometimes it's easy to think promises only work in fairy tales, and people don't stick around for long, so better to always see it coming. But then sometimes, just sometimes, someone comes along that understands. They know sadness can look a lot like anger, and the deepest silences are often the loudest cries for help. They know the kids that seem the toughest are fighting the hardest for themselves. They teach you no matter how many times things break, trust, hope, and love. It can be rebuilt. So you build together, and they can show you where the pieces go. It may not look like it did before, but the walls stay up now. You don't have to worry about holding everything together, because finally, the person standing up for you is never going to let go. Court-appointed special advocates bring children together with volunteers that help them find permanent, safe, and loving homes. It is our mission to give voice to all children that have been neglected or abused and restore the promise of a better tomorrow. While CASA's programs have helped thousands of children across the nation, our work is never done. Our movement needs volunteers, partners, donors, and leaders like you, so that kids who felt abandoned can trust, can hope, can dream, and start to rebuild our lives. We can do it with builders like you. CASA in Colorado, helping youth thrive, one life at a time.
All right. So one last thing I'll say is before anybody has any questions, is word of mouth is our biggest recruitment tool. It always has been, and it maintains being our biggest recruitment tool. So please don't underestimate the power of just talking about CASA to people who you think might be interested in the volunteer role. We also get a lot of people that come to us that say things like, I heard about CASA 10 years ago, and I wasn't in a time in my life where I could do this, but now I'm ready. So it's something that people tend to never forget when they learn about CASA. It's kind of in the back of their mind. So please tell people about us. It makes a huge difference in our ability to recruit volunteers. So just keep that in mind. So now I would love to answer any questions that you all might have, and feel free to direct them at any of us. We'll answer them the best we can.
So I adopted three kids.
Go ahead.
I adopted 3 kids out of the foster care system, all with intellectual disabilities. None of them had a CASA worker. None came from good foster homes. One was actively abusive. So I'm not familiar with the CASA workers too much, considering my guys didn't have one. How long do you stay involved? I mean, when do you get involved and when is it ending? Do you continue through until they're officially adopted, or just until they're placed in an adoptive home, or how long is the time span?
Great question. So first of all, thank you for adopting kids out of the foster care system. That is incredible. So the CASA can be appointed at any time after the case is officially opened. So it can really vary. The case I am on currently, I came on about 2 months after it opened. Typically, if it's a high priority case for us to get a volunteer on, our staff will try to place somebody pretty quickly. But they can be placed at any point during the case as well. As far as how long you stay on until the case is closed. So the case can be closed when the kids return home and it's deemed that, that the parents have abided by their treatment plan. The kids are at home. This is the best environment for them. Now the case is closed. It can end in what's called APR, so allocation of parental responsibility or rights. In that situation, the parental rights aren't terminated, but the kids are now under the responsibility of somebody else, such as a family member or a friend, and the case is being closed. And then sometimes, as you mentioned, it goes to a termination of parental rights here at trial. And if parental rights are terminated, then the kids would be placed up for adoption. And the CASA would remain on the case until the kids are adopted and the case is closed. So it really can vary depending on what's going on and the situation. But also after the case closes, our CASAs can actually stay in touch with the kids on their case. So you don't have to cut off contact when that case closes. Obviously, there's a lot of factors that go into that. Whoever the kids are living with, it would obviously be up to them if they're allowing you to still see them. My first case I was on, I had 2 teenagers and now they are 18, they're adults. So I am still in touch with them. So that's really nice, especially for people who tend to, get attached, right? You don't want to just cut off contact.
So let's say they're in a foster home. How do you also get to know the adoptive parents? Would you go along with the visitations or?
Great question. So as far as visits with the kids, you're going to visit them in whatever home environment they're in. So you would get to know the foster parents, of course. One, if it's to a point where rights have been terminated of the parents and you're looking at adoptive families for these kids, then that would be something that you could be involved with as a CASA too, getting to know those potential adoptive parents as well. Did that answer your question?
Let's say that they're in foster care, but the parents have the right of visitation. I had to take my boys to the courthouse and they visited with adoptive parents. Does the CASA go to those visits to see how they interact with the biological parents as well? I mean, biological, not adoptive.
Oftentimes, yes. So a lot of times our CASAs will attend the supervised visitations and things like that to see the interactions between the biological parents and kids. Cheryl, I don't know if you've had any experience with that since your kiddos are in foster care, but yes, that's often something that our CASAs are doing.
Yeah, the respondent parents on my case were given the opportunity to meet with the children in a supervised setting, and they never did. So, so I never got to take part in that type of event.
A lot of what you hear from us on our team is it all depends. On my first case, the girls were 17 for the majority of the time I was on the case, and they wanted nothing to do with their parents until the very end is when they started to communicate. But they had really no interaction with their parents because they refused to see them, not to the efforts of their parents. The parents wanted to, mend the relationship and see them, but it took time. So my interactions on that case were really just at court and those team meetings with the parents because the girls didn't have much contact with them. So it really all kind of depends.
Yeah, mine were young enough, they didn't have a choice. Kevin screamed every time he went to see his biological parents.
Oh gosh.
He still had to go every week. He set up conferences with the schools teachers to get to know how they're going on with schools rather than just going to IEP meetings. They're allowed to do
That's
that.
really important to our volunteers. A lot of times this can be a huge area where they can really help, is keeping in touch with the schools and the teachers and helping them keep up with school. Often our kids are really far behind in school. So yes, absolutely, whether that's keeping in touch with the teachers or the school administration, counselors, things like that, that's something that our volunteers are often very involved with.
Abby, can I just say one thing? And it was a comment that was made a couple minutes ago about one of the children went kicking and screaming to the visitations. And I know we as judges know that, that sometimes is really, really frustrating. But the law basically provides that, especially if the case is moving toward termination, it looks like it's moving toward termination and eventual adoption, that the law says that the parents have to be given an opportunity to have contact with the children. And except for when it's, protective issues come into play, we have to do that, because I can tell you, if in fact the case goes to a termination hearing, the first thing the respondents attorneys are going to say is they never had a chance to see the kids. And Judge, it's unfair to these are small children. Of course, there's a lot of issues. Of course, there's going to cry, but I mean, and I'm not making light of this, and please don't misinterpret it. But I mean, that's why, all those options have to be at least explored, because, what I think I indicated earlier, that this is a collaborative court, but it's also a court. And if at the end of the day, we're making some really tough decisions, and we have to make them as judges based upon the testimony and the evidence that we have before us. So I think the point I'm saying, I understand the frustration, and it really is frustration. And but you have to kind of put your judge hat on and say, this is what we have to do, and this is what we have to do. So I just wanted to throw that out, because I know I know, especially for some of the parents and CASAs, it really is frustrating. Says, why is this judge doing this? Well, because we have to. So it's one of those, because you have to have both the short term and the long term view in terms of what's going to happen in the case.
Yeah, Kevin was sort of frustrated all around, because his termination hearing was supposed to be a week after he was placed with us, and they guaranteed 100% he was going to be terminated on. It dragged on for another 9 months.
Well,
extension.
I can tell you a story, and this I can relate this story, because it has nothing to do with my being a judge, but it has to do with a friend up in Boulder, and in fact, he was sort of an interior decorator, put some furniture in our house, and sort of the same thing. They had a child out of foster home, so they were like kind of foster adopt parents, and everything was kind of going well. Sort of same thing. There was going to be a termination hearing coming up in a month, and just all of a sudden, both of the parents just flipped and just got in total compliance with the treatment plan. So then, the case had to be continued a couple of times. The case has an odd text to it. I sort of lost contact with him, and we were on a plane one night, and I met him coming back from Chicago, and I said, "How are things going?" He says, "Well, after that fell through, we really wanted to adopt a child, so there was another child that they adopted. The first case bumped along. Of course, the parents just kind of fell off the cliff." And he says I think it's about 50. He says, at 50, I now have 2 young children that we're caring for. So, I mean, I don't mean that to be silly, but, these cases do have, and I understand that, and they have odd twists and turns to them. But it's just kind of the way it is. I mean, that's a bad way of saying it. It's just, things happen. So, but we're fully aware of that as judges, and it's not something that is not taken into consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really admire people who do this kind of work. You really have to, it takes a real commitment. And I was kind of a troubled kid, troubled teenager, caused my parents a lot of anguish. Kind of slipped through the cracks. And I came from a kind of a prominent family, and the youngest of 5 kids, and my parents were kind of tired of raising kids, and kind of was on the streets of Boulder, not nowhere to go. Kind of got in with the wrong crowd and stuff. But I never got any outside help or anything, and things it was pretty bad, for a while, and so so this is really great, and I really admire like people like Jan for like adopting kids like who really need it and really need help, and Cheryl's doing volunteer work. That's really great. And so I don't really have any questions, but I just wanted to make those comments about it. I do have one question. Do you serve Jefferson County at all?
Yes, so there is a CASA program that serves both Jefferson and Gilpin counties, and
Yeah.
they are a fantastic program.
The reason I asked that is because I live in Jefferson County, and I'm involved with the Jefferson Humanists. It's one of the groups that I'm active with, and I put on events, with them, and maybe we could, if you want to present with them, possibly. I know the secular hub down in Denver is more in your territory or closer to your territory. But this is a very specialized thing. So brainstorming how to fit in the presentation, possibly maybe because some of the times we do presentations where we'll do two things, two different subjects, in one presentation, like half hour or so, for each. So I'm just sort of thinking of ideas.
Well, this one's going on an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So I don't think we should shortchange this presentation. I think it deserves its own event.
Yeah.
And we can adapt it as far as, taking out some videos, some things and shorten things. So that's definitely possible too. Another thing to consider, so obviously Cheryl is one of our volunteers. So we're doing this presentation. We've also done joint presentations with other CASA programs. I can also, if the Jefferson County group or the Denver group are, people are largely from those areas, I can also connect you to my counterparts at those programs. Both the Denver program and Jefferson County programs do a lot of these presentations as well. So that's something to consider too, but we can always adapt our presentations to kind of fit the needs of the program.
Yeah, so I'll try to figure out, sort of be thinking about how this would work.
Well, and I think the way Abby started this all out is saying, there's 1,600 children that have open court cases, and
just
only
in our two counties.
Yeah, and only a third are have CASAs. So this is kind of a public service announcement. Hey everybody, there's a real need here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's definitely a worthwhile thing. Really, really great thing that you do.
Thank you so much. And we have programs. We work really closely with the other metro area programs. So there's a Boulder County program, Denver, Jefferson, and then there's a program that serves Arapahoe, Lincoln, Albert, and Douglas counties. And then more north, Larimer County, Weld County, south, the Colorado Springs area. So all over, we are everywhere. So even, of course, in other states too. So chances are there's a program near everyone.
What does Boulder have its own?
So they're called Boulder Voices for Children, and they have a CASA program, but they also do supervised visitations as well. And I think they might do a couple other things too, but the supervised visitation program is kind of new. So that's where, parents could go and have supervised visits, of course, with their kids. So there are some programs that do additional programming as well. We are, CASA through and through, the CASA volunteer role, but I know that they're the program serving Arapahoe County, for example, they have a tutoring program as well. So there's some additional programs out there too.
Yeah,
Any other
maybe this would be
questions?
one of those kind of presentations that we could do, collectively do it as for several of the groups at once, a multi-group event, something like that. This definitely would be something that would, would qualify in that category.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful.
And then we could combine 3 or 4 of the groups together, because we do that occasionally.
That's what I was originally hoping for this one, but I think I started a little too late, trying to organize that and get approval by the boards,
Yeah.
And but
ahead.
yeah, I understand that, we kind of needed to see the presentation first, to know what it's about and to sell it to the other groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a little short notice, and I didn't really know enough about it, but now I understand a lot more. Those videos were really helpful to sort of set the stage for a lot of it. So I mean, that's what we should do, is start working on that, and maybe like a month out or something, and set that up. And then you have to give the presentation, one more time, at least to our groups.
And I want to thank Judge Popovich for attending. I think it really added a sense of weight to the presentation, that we actually have a retired judge in the presentation.
Yeah.
He's great.
After all the COVID stuff, being home, I don't talk about way too much anymore. All you do is eat, But thank you very much for the compliment. And I'll just say, after I retired, I was asked to be on the board, and I grabbed at the opportunity, because it's a great program. It's really helpful to us, and I can just state, I'll just kind of tell you this: the program initially came to, at that time, Adams, I think in about 86, as I recall. And I was on the bench then, but I was not the juvenile judge when the program was implemented. And, at first, I mean, this is back, it's hard to believe how many years ago that was, the CASA really wasn't accepted all that well. And just through the strength of the program, I mean, it's now an integral part of the juvenile system, and it's in no small part due to the advocates and the volunteers and just the quality of the service. Because when it first started, it was everybody's worried about their turf and who are these guys, and we've got enough people in these cases as it is, and I don't want to say that was the prevailing attitude, but certainly was something that was evident. And now it's totally different. Where's the CASA on this case? That's kind of the word. But I appreciate the compliment. I feel really strongly, and I've really enjoyed being on the board too. It's been a great experience.
It sounds like you need a lot of CASA volunteers.
Yeah.
More. So.
And
oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.